St. Irenaeus said that God's glory is when one of us, one of his children, is fully alive. God's glory is when one of us is fully alive. Ponder on that. That's what brings glory to God, when we, God's children, live our lives fully and freely. The rich man in today's gospel parable was not fully alive. Far from it. The parable begins well. It's a parable about a rich man, and let's face it, like generations and cultures that have gone before us, we have a tendency to trip over, to fall over those who are rich and those who are famous. Most people have read more biographies of rich and famous people than they have of holy men and holy women. But as we reflect on today's gospel passage, we realize what a small life this rich man lives. How selfish and self-centered he is. Jesus sets this parable with a certain mindset. There was a rich man whose land produced a bountiful harvest. Already, there's no recognition of God's giftedness. There's no sense of stewardship, that this land is entrusted to him. It's entrusted to him to give glory to God. His land has produced a bountiful harvest. He asks himself. Now realize, this harvest is like miraculous. It's more than he's ever received before from the earth. Doesn't have a room enough for this bountiful harvest. And rather than giving God glory, rather than turning to the Lord, the Creator, the giver of all good gifts, he turns to the authority in his own life. He asks himself, "What shall I do? For I do not have space to store my harvest." And he said, "This is what I shall do. I shall tear down my barns and build larger ones. There I will store all my grain and other goods. And I shall say to myself," this is where he hears the voice of God, his own voice. "And I shall say to myself, now as for you, you have so many good things stored up for many years. Rest, eat, drink, and be merry." This is the answer to his prayer. He wants to hear this from the voice of God. Of course, he hears himself saying it because that's all he asks. It is pathetic. So self-centered, not even considering family, which is a limited perspective in itself. But it's all about me and I and mine. We have a culture that surrounds us, that views the world in precisely this way. Blessed Teresa of Calcutta saw right through our culture, saw right through the riches that our nation has been entrusted with. And in the midst of such lavishness, in the midst of such great national wealth, she saw our spiritual poverty. How small our lives had become. St. Paul gives a remedy for this malady that has infected our society, this materialism, when he tells the church, us, to focus on what is above, not what is earthly. To focus on things of God. To put earthly things to death. Our old self must die in the image of that first Adam, and we are to put on Christ, a new way of seeing the world around us. We must allow to die all those vices that are killing us. Immorality, impurity, human passion, evil design, and that greed that is idolatry. St. Paul puts greed on the same level as that horrible sin of idolatry. St. Thomas Aquinas explains that whenever we give anything the honor that is due God, if we build our lives around anything but God, it is idolatry. And that's what our society has done. And it's so easy for us to get sucked in, to be pulled into the trap. That rather than our belongings and our material goods being instruments for us to continue the mission of Christ, we become mastered by them, slaves to them. There is another vice that St. Paul mentions that is particularly destroying our society, and that is impurity. It is destroying us. We have to stop lying to one another, St. Paul says. We have to stop kidding ourselves. There is no negotiation with, compromise with that which is evil and that which destroys us, distorts our humanity. When there comes to pornography, there is no moderation. Pornography in all of its forms, whether it be lewd romance novels, that crazy book out, destructive book, 15 Shades of Grey or whatever it is. Pornography in all of its form distorts our view of humanity and the dignity that is ours as children of God. There is no compromise with it. And regardless of what our society says around us, pornography is like throwing gasoline on a fire, the fire of lust, and it enslaves and imprisons. It drives the prostitution that surrounds us, human trafficking, and it is destroying marriages and people's vocation to love as Christ loves. It distances us in our relationship with the Lord. And it's got to stop. It's one of those things, as St. Paul says, that we must allow to die with our old self. Jesus tells us in today's parable that God refers to those who build their lives on anything but a relationship with the Creator, with the Lord, as being fools. We don't know the day or the hour that we will be called back. But one thing is for sure, I don't want to be called a fool. I don't want to base my life on that which distorts the goodness of life. Rather, we want to hear those words at the end of our lives, "Well done, good and faithful servant." God's glory, St. Irenaeus tells us, is when we, one of us, his children, is fully alive, fully free. In this Eucharist, in the power of Christ and the grace that comes to us in his dying and rising, may we, his brothers and sisters, may we live truly free. May we turn away from that which enslaves us, that which is destroying us.